They said humanity would burn out before reaching the stars. They were catastrophically wrong. The Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council had stood for 17,000 cycles, a monument to order, reason, and the careful balance of power among civilized species. Its crystalline walls refracted light from a dozen distant stars, casting rainbow patterns across the assembled delegates who represented 473 member worlds. Today, those walls would bear witness to the greatest failure in Council history. Ambassador Thel'zara of the Vrin Confederacy stood at the central podium, her forearms trembling despite her best efforts at composure. The Vrin were known throughout the galaxy for their emotional control, their ability to maintain perfect calm in any crisis. But today, standing before the assembled might of galactic civilization, Thel'zara felt that famous composure crumbling like sand between her fingers. Honored council members, she began, her translator rendering her chemical speech patterns into the common tongue. I come before you with news that can no longer be contained or denied. The species we designated as Observation Subject 773, indigenous to the planet they call Earth in the Sol system, has achieved faster-than-light travel. Humanity has left its cradle. They are here among us, and we are entirely unprepared for what that means. A wave of dismissive gestures rippled through the chamber. Council member Vex'thor of the Kree Empire rose from his seat, his massive form casting a shadow across 3 rows of delegates. The Kree had ruled their corner of the galaxy for 8,000 years through military might and ruthless efficiency. They did not scare easily, Ambassador Thel'zara. With all due respect to the Vrin's reputation for thoroughness, this body has more pressing matters to address than the technological achievements of a pre-contact species. The humans were placed under observation protocols precisely because they showed promise. That they have developed FTL capability merely means they will eventually be eligible for provisional membership, nothing more. Thel'zara's skin rippled with colors that her translator didn't even attempt to interpret. Council member Vex'thor, you don't understand. I'm not here to announce humanity's eligibility for contact. I'm here to tell you that in the 3 cycles since they achieved FTL travel, they have established 17 colonies across 9 star systems, made first contact with 8 separate species without authorization, completely ignored every quarantine beacon they encountered, accidentally started to trade wars, somehow ended a 3rd conflict that had been raging for 600 years, and have just sent a delegation that is currently parked outside this very station, demanding immediate full membership in the council. The chamber erupted. 400 voices in 100 languages created a cacophony that the translation system struggled to parse. The council director, an ancient Zephyr whose translucent form had presided over sessions for 3,000 years, pulsed with bioluminescent patterns that commanded silence. Ambassador, these claims are extraordinary, the director said, their voice like wind through crystal chimes. The standard progression from first FTL flight to colonial expansion typically spans several hundred cycles. Even the most aggressive species in our records required at least 50 cycles to establish a second solar system presence. Are you suggesting that humans have compressed centuries of development into mere cycles? I'm not suggesting it, Director. I'm reporting it. And it's worse than you think. Thel'zara activated the holographic display, and the chamber filled with imagery that made even the most veteran delegates lean forward in disbelief. The first image showed a human vessel, if it could be called that. It looked like someone had taken 3 different ship designs, none of them compatible, welded them together with complete disregard for aesthetic or aerodynamic principles, and then covered the whole thing in what appeared to be advertising for something called Monster Energy and Red Bull. This is the HDMS Indomitable Spirit, Thel'zara explained, one of their colony ships. It was constructed in orbit around Earth in just 47 local days, using materials from their asteroid belt. The humans apparently have a saying, good enough for government work. This vessel violates approximately 63 different safety regulations, has no business being spaceworthy according to every engineering principle we understand, and successfully transported 4,000 colonists to Alpha Centauri in less than 2 cycles. A Quillarian engineer in the back row made a whistling sound of distress. That's impossible. The power requirements alone, they use nuclear fusion reactors, Thel'zara interrupted. Plural, 17 of them on this single ship. When asked why they needed so many, the chief engineer apparently said, and I quote, "Because 16 seemed like it might not be enough, and we figured better safe than sorry. They also have backup systems for their backup systems. And according to their documentation, something called a manual override that allows the crew to operate virtually any system by hand. If all electronics fail, that's insane," muttered a Forian delegate. "Why would you design a ship expecting your systems to fail?" "Because," Thel'zara said quietly, "in human history, their systems do fail, regularly, and they've learned to keep going anyway." She changed the image. "This is the colony they established on Alpha Centauri 4. Population, 6,000, including the 1,000 who arrived after the initial landing. Time to self-sufficiency, 89 local days. For reference, our projections indicated that it should have taken them 15 to 20 cycles to establish a self-sustaining colony, if they survived at all. Alpha Centauri 4 is a Class 3 hazard world." The image showed a thriving settlement built into the side of a mountain range, with strange architecture that seemed to blend function with an almost defiant aesthetic. Crops grew in massive hydroponic structures. Mining operations dotted the landscape, and in the center of it all, incongruously, was what appeared to be a sports stadium. "Is that recreational facility I'm seeing?" asked a delegate in disbelief. "They call it a soccer stadium, though they also use it for something called football, which is apparently a different sport, and also for concerts, public gatherings, and during an emergency last cycle. As a hospital when a local virus spread through the colony. The humans have a concept they call multi-use infrastructure. They also have a remarkable talent for improvisation." Vex'thor rose again, his expression skeptical. "Ambassador, while these achievements are noteworthy, I fail to see how this constitutes a crisis. They sound resourceful and adaptable, qualities we value in potential council members. Then, let me show you what happened when they encountered the Xithian quarantine zone." Thel'zara's colors shifted to something that her translator finally rendered. The Xithian quarantine zone was legendary among council members, though few spoke of it openly. 1,500 years ago, the Xithian civilization had fallen victim to a nanoplague of their own creation. In their final days, they had sealed their entire sector, establishing automated defense systems and broadcasting warnings in every known language. The zone contained 17 star systems, all of them death traps. The Council had maintained the quarantine ever since, and every species that reached the stars was warned, "Stay away from Xithian space." The human vessel Fuck Around and Find Out Yes, that is its actual registered name, encountered the outer quarantine beacons. 3.2 cycles ago, they received the automated warnings into 117 languages, including a newly added warning in their own English language that I had commissioned specifically for this purpose. The warnings were explicit. Xithian space contains existential hazards, no exceptions. No authorized entry, turn back immediately. And they turned back, Vex'thor said confidently. Any rational species would. They did not turn back. Thel'zara pulled up a communication log. The captain of the Fuck Around and Find Out, a human named Elizabeth Chen, sent a response to the automated system. It read, and again I quote exactly, "Thanks for the heads up. We're going to check it out anyway. Tell your bosses humans say hi." The chamber fell silent. Several delegates made gestures of horror or disbelief specific to their species. A Quillarian fainted. The director's bioluminescence flickered in a pattern that hadn't been seen in centuries. They entered the zone, Thel'zara continued. All communication was lost for 26 standard hours. We assumed they had been killed by the automated defense systems or the nanoplague. We mourned them according to human customs that we had researched, and we prepared to use their deaths as a teaching moment about the importance of heeding council warnings. She paused, her colors cycling through patterns that suggested she still didn't quite believe what she was about to say. And then they came back, not just alive, but triumphant. They had disabled the defense systems, developed a countermeasure to the nanoplague using something called CRISPR technology, and a really good hunch, and they brought back 17 Xithian survivors. The chamber exploded again. This time, the director didn't even try to restore order. They simply stared at the holographic images of human crew members, standing alongside Xithian individuals, all of them smiling in the strange way that humans did, baring their teeth in what was apparently a friendly gesture. "Impossible," Vex'thor said. But his voice lacked conviction. "The Xithians died out over a millennium ago. How could any have survived? They were in stasis," Thel'zara explained, "deep in a bunker that our surveys somehow missed across 1,500 years of monitoring. The humans found them in 3 days using what they called basic pattern recognition and stubbornness. When asked how they located survivors that had eluded our sensors for centuries, Captain Chen said, and I continue to quote because you need to hear this in their own words, "We figured if we were Xithians trying to survive, we'd hide in the most obvious place that fancy aliens with their fancy sensors would ignore. So we looked in the boring spots, found them on the 4th try." A Forian historian raised a tentacle. "What happened to the Xithians? Where are they now?" "They're living on the human colony at Alpha Centauri 4. The humans set up a quarantine habitat, helped them through the psychological trauma of their loss, and are currently teaching them English and something called meme culture to help them integrate into modern galactic society. The Xithians, for their part, are sharing their advanced nanotechnology with the humans. I've seen preliminary reports. The applications are," she trailed off, searching for words. "Let's just say that if the humans had another 10 cycles, they might have technology that rivals Council worlds that have been spacefaring for 10,000 years. Council member Sarthex of the Luminous Path, known for her wisdom and measured responses, finally spoke. Her voice carried the weight of 12,000 years of recorded history. "Ambassador Thel'zara, I begin to understand your concern, but surely we can establish diplomatic channels, integrate them slowly into Council procedures, and guide their development as we have with countless species before them." "That's what I thought too," Thel'zara said. "That's what my entire team thought. So we prepared a standard first contact package, assembled our most experienced diplomats, and arranged a meeting with the human vessel that arrived at our observation post. The ship was called the Diplomatic Incident Waiting to Happen, another actual registered name, and it carried humanity's first official delegation to the Council." She brought up an image of the human diplomatic team. They looked remarkably unremarkable by galactic standards. Bipedal, bilateral symmetry, soft skin, minimal natural defenses. They could have been any of 24 species that had joined the Council over the millennia, except for their eyes. Even through the hologram, there was something unsettling about human eyes. They looked at the universe with a mixture of curiosity, determination, and something that might have been humor. The chief diplomat is Ambassador James Rodriguez, 53 Earth years old, which is approximately middle-aged for their species. Former military officer, career diplomat, speaks 7 Earth languages, and has been learning Galactic Common for the past 6 months. By human standards, he is eminently qualified. By our standards, Thel'zara made a gesture of uncertainty. "What happened at the meeting?" prompted the director. "They rejected the standard integration timeline." Thel'zara's words fell like stones into still water. "We offered them provisional membership with full Council status achievable into 100 cycles, after they had proven their stability, sustainability, and ability to coexist peacefully with other species." Ambassador Rodriguez listened to the entire presentation, asked several thoughtful questions, and then politely but firmly told us that humanity would require full Council membership immediately, with no provisional period. Vex'thor laughed, a booming sound that echoed off the crystalline walls. "And what leverage do they imagine they have to make such demands? Did they threaten us with their makeshift ships and nuclear reactors?" "No," Thel'zara said quietly. "They offered us a deal." Ambassador Rodriguez presented us with a list of 17 current galactic crises that the Council has been unable to resolve, ranging from the Kelmer-Thoth trade dispute to the plague of silicon decay, spreading through the inner rim. He then presented detailed solutions to all 17 crises, solutions that his team had developed over the 6 months they've been observing Council proceedings. Through our public broadcasts, the chamber fell silent again. 17 crises. Some of them had been ongoing for centuries. The idea that a pre-contact species could solve even one was laughable. That they claimed to have solutions to all 17 was absurd. I assume their solutions were impractical. Sarthex asked gently. I wish they were, Thel'zara said. I had my team analyze every single proposal. They're not perfect. Some would require significant political will to implement. A few might have unforeseen consequences. But they're all viable. More than viable, they're innovative, leveraging approaches and technologies that we never considered because we were too focused on traditional methodologies. The humans call it thinking outside the box. They do it constantly, almost compulsively. She pulled up a document, and suddenly the air was filled with equations, schematics, and political frameworks that made some of the delegates lean forward with interest. This is their solution to the silicon decay plague. Our best scientists have been working on it for 40 cycles. The humans propose using a combination of quantum isolation fields and biological scrubbers, based on extremophile bacteria from their own oceans. Implementation timeline, 3 cycles. Estimated success rate, 94%. Cost, 1/10 of our current containment budget. A Quillarian scientist was frantically taking notes. A Forian engineer had started calculating something on a portable device. Even Vex'thor looked intrigued despite himself. And their price for these solutions? The director asked. Full council membership, immediate voting rights, and access to all council databases and technologies. Thel'zara paused. They also requested that we cease all observation operations in their space and formally apologize for what Ambassador Rodriguez called creepy surveillance of a sovereign species. Those were his exact words. Preposterous, Vex'thor declared. We cannot set the precedent that a species can demand council membership. The procedures exist for good reason. Stability, compatibility, proven dedication to peace. They know, Thel'zara interrupted. They've studied our procedures extensively. Ambassador Rodriguez spent 30 minutes of our meeting explaining why he understands and respects our concerns. Then he spent the next 2 hours explaining why humanity can't afford to wait 200 cycles for full membership. His arguments were, she paused, searching for the right word, compelling and terrifying. Explain, commanded the director. Thel'zara took a breath, or the equivalent in her species' physiology. Humans have an average lifespan of roughly 80 to 90 Earth years, though their medical technology is advancing rapidly. 200 cycles would span multiple human generations. Ambassador Rodriguez argued that expecting humanity to maintain consistent diplomatic positions across that time span would be unrealistic. He also pointed out that humanity's rate of technological and social development far exceeds the galactic norm. In 200 cycles, humans might be so far advanced that they would be seeking to establish their own rival council rather than joining ours. Arrogance, someone muttered from the back rows. Is it? Thel'zara asked. 3 cycles ago, they achieved FTL travel. Today, they have 17 colonies, have made unauthorized contact with multiple species, have solved problems we've struggled with for decades, and have resurrected a dead civilization. What will they accomplish in 200 cycles? What will they be capable of? The question hung in the air like a physical presence. The delegates shifted uncomfortably. The director's bioluminescence pulsed in complex patterns that suggested deep thought. There's more, Thel'zara said. Ambassador Rodriguez made it clear that if we reject their petition for immediate membership, humanity will proceed independently. They will continue expanding, continue making contact, continue developing, without council oversight or integration. He was very polite about it, but the implication was clear. We can have humans inside the council, bound by our laws and traditions, or we can have humans operating outside the council, accountable to no one but themselves. Vex'thor rose to his full imposing height. That sounds remarkably like a threat, Ambassador. No, Thel'zara corrected. A threat would be if they said they would harm us if we refuse. This is simply a statement of fact. Humans will continue being human regardless of our decision. The question before us is whether we want to be part of that process or not. And what do the humans want with council membership? Sarthex asked. What do they hope to gain? Everything, Thel'zara said simply. knowledge, technology, culture, art, history. Ambassador Rodriguez was very clear about this. Humans are hungry, not in a predatory sense, but in an exploratory one. They want to learn everything, see everything, experience everything. They want to contribute and grow and push boundaries. When I asked the ambassador what humanity's long-term goals were, he said, and I continue to quote, "Because this is important, we want to make the galaxy a better place, preferably while having interesting adventures and making friends along the way. Also, my kids really want to see an actual alien planet for vacation, and I'd like to deliver on that promise." A few delegates made sounds that might have been laughter. The tension in the chamber seemed to ease slightly. These humans, for all their disruption, sounded almost innocent in their ambitions. "Don't be fooled by their casual manner," Thel'zara warned, her colors flashing serious patterns. "I made that mistake during our initial observations. Humans use humor and self-deprecation as social lubricants, but beneath that exterior lies something far more formidable." During our meeting, I witnessed Ambassador Rodriguez negotiate with 6 different species simultaneously, managing to find common ground between groups that have been rivals for centuries. When I asked him how he managed it, he said he used to be a middle school teacher and that managing diplomatic disputes was easier than managing classroom conflicts between 13-year-olds. "What's a 13-year-old?" someone asked, a juvenile human approaching biological maturity. Apparently, they're extremely difficult to manage during this phase. The ambassador spent 20 years teaching them before entering diplomatic service. He said it was excellent preparation for dealing with hostile civilizations. The director pulsed thoughtfully. "Ambassador Thel'zara, you have given us much to consider. However, I notice you have been speaking at length about humanity's achievements and demands. You have yet to explain why you believe we are unprepared or why you seem genuinely frightened. What is it about humans that truly concerns you?" Thel'zara's colors shifted to deep purples and blacks, patterns that her species reserved for discussing fundamental threats. "Because I've been observing them for 8 cycles. I've watched their entertainment broadcasts, studied their history, analyzed their psychology, and I've come to a conclusion that I desperately wish was wrong." She activated one final holographic display. This time, it showed a timeline of human history, stretching back thousands of years. Wars, disasters, extinctions, inventions, revolutions, art, science, philosophy, the rise and fall of civilizations, all compressed into the lifespan of a species that was cosmically young. "Look at this," she said, highlighting various points on the timeline. Humans developed agriculture approximately 12,000 years ago. They went from horse-drawn carriages to landing on their own moon in less than 200 years. They split the atom, developed computers, sequenced their own genome, and achieved artificial intelligence all within a single century. This pace of advancement is not just fast by galactic standards, it's unprecedented. It's exponential. A species that advances quickly is not inherently threatening. The director observed. "No, but consider how they advance," Thel'zara countered. "Most species develop new technologies carefully, testing them extensively before implementation. Humans throw themselves at problems with what can only be described as controlled recklessness. They have a saying, 'Move fast and break things.' Another one, 'Fortune favors the bold.' And my personal favorite, 'Hold my beer and watch this.'" "What's a beer?" asked a confused delegate. "An intoxicating beverage that humans often consume before doing something inadvisable," Thel'zara explained. The phrase is used when a human is about to attempt something dangerous or ill-advised, but potentially spectacular. It's become a meme in their culture, which is another concept that's difficult to explain, but essentially means a self-replicating idea that spreads through their society like a virus. She zoomed in on various conflicts in human history. They've fought countless wars among themselves, world wars that engulfed entire continents, civil wars that tore nations apart. And yet, somehow, they keep rebuilding. They keep trying. They learn from their mistakes, sometimes slowly, often painfully, but they learn. And here's what terrifies me. Despite all their conflicts, despite all their divisions, when humans face an external threat or a common goal, they unify with a speed and efficiency that defies logic. A historical montage played across the hologram. Humans working together during disasters, international cooperation on space projects, the formation of their global institutions. When their planet faced ecological collapse, they came together. When they decided to reach for the stars, they pooled resources across former enemy nations. They have a remarkable ability to set aside differences when survival or ambition demands it. Many species can unite against common threats, Vex'thor pointed out. Yes, but humans do something more than unite, they inspire each other. They have an entire genre of art dedicated to uplifting narratives about ordinary individuals achieving extraordinary things. They tell stories about the underdog triumphing against impossible odds. They celebrate failure as a learning opportunity. They have a cultural concept called the human spirit. That is essentially a belief that they can overcome any obstacle through determination and innovation. Thel'zara's colors flickered with something that might have been admiration mixed with fear. And here's the crucial point. It's not just cultural mythology. They actually do it. They actually overcome impossible obstacles. They landed on their moon with computer technology less advanced than what we use in children's toys. They sent probes outside their solar system using 1970s technology that is still functioning today. They've survived multiple extinction-level events in their planet's history. They are, by any objective measure, one of the most resilient and adaptable species we've ever encountered. The chamber was silent now, the delegates processing this information. Sarthex spoke carefully. You're suggesting that humans are not just another species seeking council membership. You're suggesting they might fundamentally alter the balance of galactic civilization. I'm saying it's inevitable, Thel'zara said bluntly. With or without our approval, with or within our council, humans are going to change everything. The only question is whether we're going to be part of shaping that change, or scrambling to adapt to it. Surely you exaggerate, a delegate protested. One species, however remarkable, cannot reshape a galactic civilization that spans 473 member worlds and 17,000 years of history. Thel'zara smiled, an expression she'd learned from watching human broadcasts. It was not a comforting expression. 3 cycles ago, I would have agreed with you. Today, I can show you 17 human colonies, 8 new first contacts, a resurrected civilization, and solutions to problems we couldn't solve. What will I be able to show you in 3 more cycles? In 30? In 300? She pulled up one final image. It was a photograph from the human delegation ship, showing Ambassador Rodriguez and his team standing in front of a banner that read, "Earth delegation to the Galactic Council, we come in peace. But we brought lawyers just in case." That's human humor, Thel'zara explained to the confused delegates. But it's also a message. They're saying they understand the game we're playing. They know that admission to the council is political as much as it is procedural. They know that we're concerned about their disruptive influence. And they're telling us, in their characteristically irreverent way, that they're prepared for whatever negotiations come next. Ambassador Rodriguez and his delegation are currently waiting outside this chamber. She continued, "They've been waiting patiently for 6 hours while I've given this briefing, though I'm told they've been entertaining themselves by starting a poker game with some of our station's security personnel and apparently winning consistently." "What's poker?" someone asked. "A game of chance and strategy that humans play with small rectangles of printed material called cards. It involves betting, bluffing, and psychological manipulation. According to the security chief, the humans are very good at it. They've won enough credits to pay for their ship's docking fees for the next month." Vex'thor made a sound of frustration. "This is absurd. We're the Galactic Council. We've maintained order and civilization for 17 millennia. We cannot allow ourselves to be pushed around by a species that discovered faster-than-light travel 3 cycles ago. No matter how innovative or adaptable they might be. Then what do you propose?" Thel'zara asked. "Do we reject their petition? Do we insist they follow the standard 200-cycle integration timeline? Do we really believe that we'll work with a species that violates quarantine zones for fun and resurrects dead civilizations on a dare? We maintain our standards," Vex'thor said firmly. "We explain the rules, we enforce the procedures, and we trust that even humans will recognize the wisdom of order and patience." I tried that approach, Thel'zara said quietly. Before the session, I met privately with Ambassador Rodriguez. I explained, in detail, why the procedures exist, why we require the integration period, why we can't simply grant immediate full membership to a species we've barely studied. Do you know what he said? The chamber waited. He said, "I understand completely, Ambassador Thel'zara. Your concerns are valid, your procedures are reasonable, and your caution is admirable. However, humanity cannot and will not wait 200 cycles. Not because we're arrogant or impatient, but because 200 cycles from now, we'll either be irrelevant to your council or so far beyond it that membership will be meaningless. So let's skip ahead to the part where you realize we're going to be here whether you like it or not, and figure out how to make this work for everyone. That's..." The director paused, searching for words. "That's remarkably presumptuous." "Yes," Thel'zara agreed. "It's also probably correct. Which brings me to why I'm truly here. Why I've spent 6 hours of your time detailing humanity's achievements and peculiarities. I'm not asking you to vote on whether to admit humans to the Council. That decision has already been made, whether we acknowledge it or not. I'm asking you to decide how we're going to manage the integration of a species that refuses to be managed, how we're going to guide the development of a civilization that develops faster than we can guide, and how we're going to maintain galactic order when humans are, by their very nature, agents of creative chaos." She let that sink in before continuing. "The humans have a phrase, adapt or die. They've used it throughout their history, in contexts ranging from biological evolution to business strategy. It's a harsh phrase, but it's also accurate. The Council needs to adapt to the reality of humanity, or we risk becoming irrelevant." "Are you suggesting," Sarthak said slowly, "that we should simply capitulate to their demands? Grant them full membership with no integration period?" "I'm suggesting we negotiate," Thel'zara said. "We leverage what they want immediate Council membership to ensure they accept certain conditions. Training programs, cultural exchange initiatives, oversight committees. We make them part of the system, but we also make sure the system has safeguards." "And if they refuse conditions?" Vex'thor asked. "Then we remind them that while they may be innovative and adaptable, we have 17,000 years of experience in galactic governance. We may not advance as quickly as they do, but we have wisdom, resources, and relationships they need. It's not about domination or submission. It's about partnership." The director's bioluminescence pulsed in patterns that suggested both concern and calculation. "You've given us much to consider, Ambassador Thel'zara. I believe this council needs time to deliberate before we speak with the human delegation." In the meantime, the director was interrupted by a soft chimming sound that indicated a priority communication. A holographic interface appeared, showing one of the station's administrative staff. Their expression worried. "Apologies for the interruption, Director, but we have a situation. The human delegation has, well, they've done something." "Explain," the director commanded. "They've been observing the council session through the public broadcast feed. Apparently, they realized they were the topic of discussion and decided to. I'm told the phrase they used was speed things along. Approximately 5 minutes ago, they uploaded a document to the council's public database." "What kind of document?" Thel'zara asked, though she had a sinking feeling she already knew. "It's titled the Human Integration Plan, a comprehensive proposal for immediate council membership, with safeguards for all parties. It's 200 pages long, has been translated into all council languages, and includes detailed frameworks for cultural exchange, technology sharing, oversight committees, dispute resolution, and what they call expectation management. It also includes testimonials from the 8 species they've already made contact with, all of whom apparently support immediate human membership." The chamber erupted again. Delegates were pulling up the document on their personal devices, scrolling through pages, exclaiming in various languages. Thel'zara pulled it up herself and began reading. Despite her species' reputation for emotional control, she felt something that might have been pride mixed with exasperation. The document was thorough, well-researched, and addressed virtually every concern she'd raised in her briefing. "They wrote this in 6 months," Sarthak said in amazement. While learning our language and establishing colonies and solving our crises, humans have a remarkable ability to multitask, Thel'zara said dryly. And apparently they're very good at anticipating objections. This is manipulation. Vex'thor declared. They're trying to force our hand by going public. Actually, the administrative staff member interjected nervously. They've also included a note. It says, we're not trying to manipulate anyone. We're trying to be efficient. You're busy, we're busy. So we figured we'd save everyone time by putting our proposal in writing. If the council wants to modify anything, we're happy to negotiate. We just thought having a starting point would be helpful. Also, we brought snacks if anyone gets hungry. Ambassador Rodriguez says the chocolate chip cookies are particularly good. Several delegates made sounds that might have been laughter. Even the director's bioluminescence flickered in patterns that suggested amusement. Thel'zara found herself making colors that indicated reluctant admiration. This was so perfectly, quintessentially human, audacious and considerate, presumptuous and thoughtful, all at the same time. I believe, the director said after a long moment, that we should invite the human delegation into the chamber. It seems inefficient to continue discussing them when they're clearly ready to discuss themselves. Are we prepared for that? Asked a nervous delegate. We haven't agreed on a position or strategy. We've had 17,000 years to prepare for this moment, the director observed. If we're not ready now, we never will be. And besides, I'm curious about these chocolate chip cookies. As the administrative staff member left to retrieve the human delegation, Thel'zara felt a strange mixture of emotions. Relief that her warning had been heard, anxiety about what came next, and underneath it all, a growing sense of excitement. The galaxy was about to change in ways both frightening and wonderful. The doors to the grand chamber opened. Ambassador Rodriguez entered first, flanked by his delegation team. They moved with confidence, but not arrogance, curiosity evident in their expressions. Rodriguez himself was exactly as he'd appeared in the holos, middle-aged by human standards, with dark skin, graying hair, and eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. He approached the central podium, looked up at the assembled delegates from 473 worlds, and smiled that characteristic human smile. Honored council members, he began, his translator rendering his words into hundreds of languages simultaneously. Thank you for agreeing to meet with us. I promise we'll try not to take up too much of your time. We know you're all very busy keeping the galaxy running smoothly. He paused, then added with a slight grin, though we do have 17 ideas about how you could be doing it more efficiently if you're interested. But first, I believe we have some things to discuss about Earth's membership application, and possibly also about those cookies I mentioned. We really did bring enough for everyone. Somewhere in the back rows, a delegate whispered to their neighbor, "What have we gotten ourselves into?" Thel'zara, standing at the side of the chamber, allowed herself a private moment of certainty. Whatever happened next, the galaxy would never be the same, and deep down, she suspected that might not be entirely a bad thing. The council was about to learn that negotiating with humans was nothing like negotiating with any species they'd encountered before, and Ambassador Rodriguez had only just begun to surprise them. Ambassador James Rodriguez stood at the central podium of the Grand Chamber, a human among aliens, and somehow managed to look completely at ease. His delegation fanned out behind him, each member carrying what appeared to be containers of the promised snacks. A younger human woman with bright red hair began distributing them to the nearest delegates, who accepted them with various degrees of confusion and curiosity. Before we begin formal discussions, Rodriguez said, his tone conversational despite the historic nature of the moment, I want to address what I'm sure is your primary concern. You're worried that humanity is going to disrupt the carefully balanced system you've maintained for 17,000 years. And you're absolutely right to be worried, because we probably will. The chamber went silent. Several delegates froze mid-reach for the offered cookies. This was not how diplomatic overtures typically began. Rodriguez smiled. But here's the thing, disruption isn't always bad. Sometimes systems need disrupting. Sometimes the way things have always been done isn't the optimal way to do them. And sometimes an outside perspective can identify solutions that insiders missed because they were too close to. The problem, he gestured to the holographic display, pulling up the document his team had uploaded. That's what we're offering. Not replacement, not domination. Partnership with a species that thinks differently than you do. Vex'thor rose from his seat, his massive form imposing even across the chamber. Ambassador Rodriguez, with all due respect, thinking differently is not qualification enough for council membership. We have procedures that take 200 cycles, Rodriguez interrupted smoothly. Yes, Ambassador Thel'zara explained them thoroughly. And in a galaxy where most species develop at a relatively predictable pace, those procedures make perfect sense. But humanity doesn't develop at a predictable pace. We're exponential, not linear. Asking us to wait 200 cycles is like asking a supernova to pause mid-explosion. That's exactly why you should wait, another delegate called out. If you're developing that rapidly, you need time to stabilize, to ensure you don't burn out or collapse inward. Rodriguez nodded, acknowledging the point. Valid concern. Let me address it with some context about human psychology and history. He pulled up a new holographic display showing Earth's timeline. Humans have been in a constant state of rapid change for our entire recorded history. Agricultural revolution, industrial revolution, information revolution. Space age, we've never been stable in the way you mean it. But here's what you need to understand. Instability is our stable state. Change is our constant. We don't stabilize and then advance. We advance continuously. And we've built our entire civilization around managing that constant state of flux. A Quillarian scholar leaned forward, genuinely interested despite the irregularity of the situation. How does a civilization function in constant flux? How do you maintain social cohesion? Carefully, Rodriguez said with a slight grin. But more seriously, we develop adaptive institutions. We create flexible frameworks that can evolve with us. We cultivate a culture that values both tradition and innovation simultaneously. It's messy, it's chaotic, and it doesn't always work perfectly. But it works well enough that we've gone from stone tools to starships in the blink of an eye. Cosmically speaking, he pulled up images of human cities, showing architecture that blended ancient and modern, traditional and experimental. This is Tokyo. Buildings from 3 different centuries standing side by side. This is Rome, where structures from 3,000 years ago are still in use, surrounded by contemporary construction. Humans don't erase our past when we build our future. We layer them. Fascinating, murmured Sarthex, the ancient Luminous Path Council member. But it still doesn't explain why you need immediate full membership rather than provisional status. Rodriguez's expression became more serious. Because provisional status means you'll be watching us, but we won't have a voice in decisions that affect us. You'll be establishing protocols and regulations for human space, human colonies, human interactions with other species, and we won't have a vote. That's taxation without representation. And humanity has some historical experience with how well that works out. Are you threatening rebellion? Vex'thor demanded. No. I'm predicting frustration that will lead to exactly the kind of instability you're trying to avoid. Rodriguez countered. Give us a seat at the table, and we'll work within your system. Exclude us from decision-making while trying to regulate us, and we'll root around you. Not because we're rebellious by nature, though we can be, but because we'll have no other choice. The director's bioluminescence pulsed thoughtfully. You speak of working within our system, Ambassador, yet your species has already violated numerous council protocols. The quarantine zones, the unauthorized first contacts, the unregulated colonial expansion. We didn't know about those protocols. Rodriguez interrupted gently. You can't violate rules you've never been told about. We've been operating based on the information available to us, which was essentially nothing because you classified us as an observation species. The moment you make first contact and explain the rules, we're happy to follow them. Or at least negotiate about the ones that seem unreasonable. Negotiate. Vex'thor said incredulously. The Council's regulations are not subject to negotiation with provisional members. Then it's a good thing we're applying for full membership, Rodriguez said cheerfully. Full members can propose amendments, right? I read through your charter. It's actually quite well designed, very thorough. Though I did notice a few clauses that might benefit from updating given modern conditions. Thel'zara, watching from the side of the chamber, saw several delegates flipping through their copies of the Council Charter on their devices, checking whether Rodriguez was correct about amendment procedures. He was, of course. The humans had done their homework. Ambassador Rodriguez, the director said, their voice carrying a tone of mild exasperation mixed with what might have been respect. You are being remarkably presumptuous about humanity's role in this council. Yes, I am. Rodriguez agreed easily. Want to know why? Because in the 6 months since we discovered faster-than-light travel existed, and that we weren't alone in the universe, my entire planet went through something between an existential crisis and a collective awakening. We had to confront the fact that everything we thought we knew about our place in the cosmos was wrong. We're not alone, we're not special, we're not even particularly advanced by galactic standards. His expression softened, becoming more genuine. That realization could have broken us. Some people wanted to retreat, to close our borders and pretend the galaxy didn't exist. Others wanted to rush out aggressively, to prove that humanity mattered. But most of us landed somewhere in the middle. We decided that if we were late to the galactic community, we'd better catch up fast. And if we were going to catch up, we'd better do it by being useful, by contributing something valuable. He gestured to the document still displayed in the holographic space. That's what this proposal represents. Not arrogance, but ambition tempered with pragmatism. Not demands, but an offer of partnership. We're not asking you to let us into your club just because we want in. We're showing you what we can contribute and asking you to judge whether that contribution is worth accommodating our admittedly unusual integration timeline. A younger delegate from a species Thel'zara didn't immediately recognize spoke up nervously. Ambassador, I've been reading your proposal. Section 7 discusses cultural exchange programs. You're suggesting that human artists, scientists, and educators be embedded in council worlds, and vice versa. Why? Rodriguez brightened visibly. Excellent question. Because the real value of a galactic civilization isn't just shared technology or trade routes. It's shared perspectives. Human art will be enriched by exposure to 473 different cultures. And maybe, just maybe, human perspectives on art, science, philosophy, and life might enrich your cultures too. We're not trying to homogenize everything. We're trying to create opportunities for creative cross-pollination. He pulled up images of human art, paintings, sculptures, music, literature. This is what humans create when we're inspired by our own world. Imagine what we might create when inspired by yours. And imagine what your artists might create when exposed to human perspectives. That's not disruption, that's growth. That's evolution. A Forian delegate tentacle gestured in a pattern that indicated cautious interest. Your proposal also mentions technology sharing. You're offering human innovations to council members with appropriate safeguards and licensing agreements. Yes, Rodriguez confirmed. We're not naive. We understand that some technologies could be misused, but we believe that hoarding innovation serves no one. If humans develop something useful, we'd rather share it and see what improvements other species might make. Collaborative development tends to produce better results than isolated work. And you'll accept council technology in return? Pressed the Forian. Absolutely. We're not too proud to learn from species that have been spacefaring for millennia, while we were still figuring out agriculture. In fact, that's one of the main reasons we want immediate full membership access to your databases and educational resources. Humans are voracious learners. Give us access to 17,000 years of accumulated knowledge, and we'll absorb it like sponges and probably find connections between different fields that you haven't considered because your species specialize differently than we do. Sarthex spoke again, her ancient voice carrying weight. Ambassador Rodriguez, you speak of human adaptability and innovation as though they are unalloyed goods, but rapid change can be destructive. Technology without wisdom leads to catastrophe. Humanity's own history demonstrates this. Your world wars, your environmental damage, your near-extinction events. Rodriguez's expression became somber. You're absolutely right, Council Member Sarthex. We've made terrible mistakes. We've fought devastating wars. We've nearly destroyed our own planet through short-sightedness. We're not perfect, and we're not pretending to be. But here's what we've learned from those mistakes. The director's bioluminescence pulsed in complex patterns. Ambassador Rodriguez, Dr. Chen, you make compelling arguments. But I notice you've spent considerable time telling us about human psychology, human achievements, and human proposals. You've told us what humanity can offer the Council. What you haven't addressed is what humanity needs from the Council. Failure is only catastrophic if you don't learn from it. He pulled up more images from Earth's history, unflinching in showing humanity's darkest moments. World wars, environmental devastation, nuclear weapons testing. We did all of this. We're not proud of it, but we survived it, learned from it, and built better systems to prevent it from happening again. Our global government emerged from the recognition that isolated nations making independent decisions about weapons of mass destruction was insane. Our environmental regulations came from nearly destroying our own ecosystem. Our human rights frameworks came from the ashes of genocides and slavery. The chamber was silent, delegates staring at the evidence of humanity's capacity for both destruction and recovery. Rodriguez continued, his voice quiet but firm. That's what humanity brings to the Council. Not perfection, but resilience. Not wisdom born from millennia of stability, but wisdom earned through surviving our own mistakes. We know what it's like to stare into the abyss, because we've been there. And we know how to climb back out. Vex'thor made a dismissive gesture. Learning from mistakes is admirable, Ambassador, but it's hardly unique. Every species in this chamber has overcome challenges. True, Rodriguez agreed. But how many of your species have overcome challenges while simultaneously advancing technologically? At exponential rates, how many have had to develop global governance structures while also splitting the atom? How many have had to create environmental protection protocols while industrializing at unprecedented speed? Humans don't have the luxury of solving one problem at a time. We have to juggle multiple existential crises simultaneously while also pushing forward. It makes us really, really good at crisis management, a delegate from the back rows called out. You make it sound like humanity's chaos is a feature, not a bug, Rodriguez grinned. Because it is. Controlled chaos, managed disruption, creative destruction, call it what you want. But it's humanity's competitive advantage. You've had 17,000 years of stability. That's impressive, truly. But stability can become stagnation. Sometimes you need someone to come along and ask, why do we do it this way? Not to be difficult, but because there might be a better way that no one's considered. Like your solutions to our 17 ongoing crises? The director asked, a note of curiosity in their chiming voice, exactly like that. Rodriguez confirmed. He pulled up the first proposal. Take the Kelmer-Thoth trade dispute. You've been trying to resolve it for 214 cycles. Using traditional mediation techniques, both sides have legitimate grievances, incompatible economic systems, and deep cultural mistrust. Your mediators have been trying to find a compromise that makes both sides happy. And you think you can succeed where Council mediators have failed? Vex'thor asked skeptically. We think you're approaching it wrong, Rodriguez said bluntly. You're trying to make both sides happy, which is impossible because they fundamentally want different things. Instead, we propose creating a neutral third party that both sides distrust equally us. Let humans establish a trading intermediary. The Kelmer sell to us, we sell to the Thoth. Everyone gets what they need without direct interaction. It's not elegant, and it doesn't resolve the underlying cultural tensions, but it works. Sometimes pragmatic is better than perfect. A Kelmer delegate in the chamber made a gesture of surprise. That could actually work. Why didn't anyone suggest this before? Because you've been thinking inside your cultural frameworks, Rodriguez said gently. Both Kelmer and Thoth cultures value direct negotiation and personal honor. The idea of using an intermediary feels like an insult to both of you. But humans don't have those cultural constraints with you. We're the new kids. We can be the middlemen without it being an insult, because everyone expects us to be ignorant of proper protocol anyway. Several delegates made sounds that might have been laughter. Thel'zara felt a surge of vindication. This was exactly what she'd been trying to explain. Humans thought differently, and that difference had value. Rodriguez continued through several more proposals, each time demonstrating not just innovative solutions, but also deep understanding of the underlying problems. the silicon decay plague solution using Earth's extremophile bacteria, the diplomatic deadlock in the Outer Rim resolved through what humans called sports diplomacy, establishing neutral ground through competitive games, the resource shortage in the core worlds addressed through asteroid mining techniques humans had developed out of necessity. You've put considerable thought into our problems, Sarthex observed. Why, you could have simply demanded membership without offering anything in return. Rodriguez looked surprised by the question. Because that's not how partnerships work. You don't show up to someone's house demanding to be let in without bringing anything to the table. Humans believe in reciprocity. You're considering giving us something valuable, council membership. We should demonstrate that we're worth the investment. Besides, added Dr. Sarah Chen, Rodriguez's chief science advisor, and Thel'zara noted with interest, the captain of the Fuck Around and Find Out, stepping forward to join him at the podium. We're not just asking for membership out of self-interest. We genuinely wanted to help. Humans have this weird psychological quirk where we're happiest when we're solving problems, preferably problems that help others. Give us a challenge, tell us lives are at stake, and we'll throw ourselves at it with everything we've got, even when the challenge is monumentally dangerous. Thel'zara interjected from her position at the side. Dr. Chen, perhaps you could explain to the council why you violated the Xithian quarantine zone after being explicitly warned of the dangers? Chen grinned, completely unrepentant, because the warnings said there might be survivors and that approaching was inadvisable. Might be survivors means definitely worth checking, and inadvisable is just a challenge in disguise. Besides, what's the point of having a spaceship called Fuck Around and Find Out if you don't occasionally fuck around and find out? The translation system struggled with the profanity, rendering it in approximately 400 different languages with varying degrees of accuracy. Several delegates looked scandalized. Others looked intrigued. Vex'thor looked like he was developing a headache, which was impressive given that his species' physiology didn't typically produce headaches. Dr. Chen, the director said carefully, you do understand that the quarantine existed for very good reasons? The Xithian nano-plague killed billions. I do understand that, Chen said, her tone becoming more serious. And we didn't go in recklessly. We analyzed the warning broadcasts, studied everything we could find about Xithian technology in our databases, and developed countermeasures before we ever crossed the quarantine line. We had isolation protocols, decontamination procedures, and a dead man's switch that would have vaporized our ship if the plague had breached containment. We were careful. We were just also determined. Why? Asked a delegate. Why risk your lives for a species that died out over a millennium ago? Chen looked at the delegate like they'd asked why water was wet. Because they might not all be dead. Because if even one Xithian survived, they deserve to be rescued. Because leaving someone to die when you might be able to save them isn't an option. It's not complicated. It's just human. Rodriguez stepped back up. And this is what I mean about human psychology. We have this almost compulsive need to help, to fix, to save. It gets us into trouble sometimes. We bite off more than we can chew. We take risks we probably shouldn't. We ignore warnings we should probably heed. But it also means that when there's a crisis, when lives are at stake, when something needs doing and everyone else is standing around, saying it's impossible, humans are the ones who try anyway. And sometimes you succeed spectacularly, Sarthex observed, and sometimes you fail catastrophically. True, Rodriguez acknowledged. But we'd rather try and fail than never try at all. We have a saying on Earth, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. It's about basketball, which is a sport involving throwing balls through hoops, but the principle applies more broadly. Inaction is a choice, and often it's the wrong choice. Rodriguez and Chen exchanged glances. Some silent communication passed between them, and Chen stepped back, letting Rodriguez take the lead again. His expression became more serious, more vulnerable. Honestly, we need guidance, he said simply. We need the wisdom that comes from 17,000 years of multi-species cooperation. We need to learn from your mistakes so we don't repeat them. We need frameworks for interspecies interaction, protocols for preventing conflicts, systems for managing resources across multiple worlds. We're good at innovation, but we're terrible at knowing what we don't know. He pulled up an image of Earth from space, that famous blue marble hanging in the black void. 6 months ago, this was our entire universe. We had theories about alien life, hopes for contact, but no concrete knowledge. Then we achieved FTL travel and discovered we were surrounded by hundreds of species, thousands of civilizations, millions of years of history we knew nothing about. It was overwhelming. It still is overwhelming. His voice carried genuine emotion now. We're like kids who just discovered there's a whole library outside our bedroom, and we've only read one book. We're excited and terrified in equal measure. We want to read everything, learn everything, experience everything. But we're smart enough to know we need teachers. We need mentors. We need elder species who can help us navigate this vast, complex galaxy without making catastrophic mistakes. And yet you resist the standard integration timeline that would provide exactly that guidance. Vex'thor pointed out, because your timeline assumes we'll learn at the pace your species learned. Rodriguez countered, it assumes we need 100 cycles to absorb information that we could absorb in 20 cycles, or even 2. Give us access to your educational databases, your historical archives, your cultural repositories. Let us send students to your universities, researchers to your institutes, diplomats to your embassies. We'll learn faster than you expect, and we'll contribute while we're learning. You ask for a great deal of trust, the director observed. We do, Rodriguez agreed. But we're also offering trust in return. We're sharing our technology, our innovations, our solutions. We're opening our worlds to cultural exchange. We're putting ourselves under council jurisdiction, accepting your laws and regulations. That's a huge leap of faith for a species that's been sovereign for its entire existence. A younger Vryn delegate, who hadn't spoken before, raised a tentacle hesitantly. Ambassador Rodriguez, I have a question that might seem naive, but I'm genuinely curious. What do humans want, long term? If we grant you council membership, if you integrate successfully, if you learn everything we can teach you, what then? What's humanity's endgame? Rodriguez smiled, and it was perhaps the most genuine expression Thel'zara had seen from him. We want to see what's out there. We want to explore strange new worlds, to seek out new life and new civilizations. We want to contribute to the galaxy, make it a better place, solve problems that need solving. We want our children to grow up in a universe full of wonder and possibility. And maybe, if we're really lucky, we want to make some friends along the way. He paused, then added, there's a speech from one of our cultural touchstones, a fictional space exploration program called Star Trek. It talks about going boldly where no one has gone before. That's humanity's endgame in a nutshell. Not conquest, not domination, not even necessarily leadership. Just exploration, discovery, growth, making tomorrow better than today, then making the day after that better still. It's simple and infinitely complex at the same time. The chamber was quiet. Delegates were processing everything they'd heard, weighing Rodriguez's words against their own concerns and interests. Thel'zara watched the director, trying to read their bioluminescent patterns. The ancient Zephyr was considering something, their light pulsing in rhythms she'd never quite seen before. Finally, Vex'thor rose again. The massive Kree warrior diplomat had been Rodriguez's most consistent skeptic. Throughout the session, everyone turned to hear what he would say. Ambassador Rodriguez, Vex'thor began, his voice carrying across the chamber. I have opposed humanity's petition since before you entered this chamber. I believed your species was too young, too chaotic, too disruptive to integrate into council society. I believed you needed time to mature, to stabilize, to prove yourselves worthy of membership. Rodriguez nodded, accepting the criticism without defensiveness. And now, Vex'thor was silent for a long moment. Now I believe I was asking the wrong question. The question isn't whether humanity is ready for the council. The question is whether the council is ready for humanity. And I'm not certain we are. That statement sent ripples through the chamber. Delegates turned to each other, some agreeing, others objecting. Vex'thor continued, but I also believe that Ambassador Thel'zara was correct in her warning. Humanity is here, whether we're ready or not. They're establishing colonies. They're making contact. They're solving problems and breaking rules and generally refusing to conform to our expectations. We can either accept that reality and work with it, or we can cling to our procedures while the galaxy changes around us. He looked directly at Rodriguez. I have one question for you, Ambassador, and I want an honest answer, not a diplomatic one. If this council rejects your petition for immediate membership, if we insist on the standard integration timeline, what will humanity do? Rodriguez met his gaze steadily. Honestly, we'll be disappointed. We'll feel like we weren't heard, like we weren't given a fair chance. But we won't stop. We'll keep expanding, keep exploring, keep developing. We'll establish relationships with individual council members who are willing to work with us. We'll create our own frameworks and systems for managing our colonies and interactions. And into 100 cycles, when you decide we're finally ready for membership, we'll probably politely decline because we'll have built our own parallel structure. That works for us. That sounds like a threat. Someone muttered. It's a prediction. Rodriguez corrected. Not a threat, not even a preference. It's just what will probably happen based on human psychology and history. We don't do well with being told to wait when we're ready to move forward. We root around obstacles. We find alternative paths. It's not malicious. It's just how we're wired. Vex'thor made a sound that might have been approval. An honest answer as requested. I respect that. He turned to address the full council. I am changing my position. I support granting humanity provisional membership immediately, with a pathway to full membership contingent on successful integration over a shortened timeline. Perhaps 20 cycles instead of 200. The chamber erupted in discussion. Rodriguez looked surprised but pleased. Thel'zara felt a surge of something that might have been hope. Sarthax spoke next, her ancient voice cutting through the noise. I agree with Council Member Vex'thor's assessment, though I would propose a different approach. Rather than provisional membership, I suggest we create a new category, accelerated integration. Full membership immediately, but with additional oversight and support structures for the first 10 cycles. Regular reviews, enhanced cultural exchange, dedicated council advisors assigned to human worlds. Not because we don't trust them, but because even humans cannot learn 17,000 years of history in 6 months. Rodriguez nodded eagerly. We would absolutely accept those terms. In fact, we'd welcome the oversight and support. Like I said, we know what we don't know, and we're not too proud to ask for help. Other delegates began weighing in, some supporting various versions of immediate or accelerated integration, others still advocating for traditional timelines. The debate was vigorous but no longer hostile. Somehow, Rodriguez had shifted the conversation from whether humans should be admitted to how they should be integrated. The director allowed the discussion to continue for some time before finally pulsing in a pattern that commanded attention. Council members, we have heard compelling arguments from multiple perspectives. Ambassador Rodriguez, Dr. Chen, and their delegation have presented themselves and humanity's case admirably. I believe we have sufficient information to move toward a decision, though not necessarily today. Rodriguez started to speak, then stopped himself. The director noticed and made a gesture of curiosity. You wish to say something, Ambassador? Just that waiting is difficult for humans, Rodriguez admitted. Not because we're impatient, though we are, but because uncertainty is stressful. If the council needs time to deliberate, we understand. But could we at least establish a timeline for when a decision will be made? Days, weeks, cycles. The director's bioluminescence flickered in what might have been amusement. The council will convene in private session immediately following this meeting. We will deliberate through the night cycle. A decision will be announced tomorrow at the start of the next session. Will 12 standard hours be acceptable? Rodriguez looked like he'd been offered a gift. 12 hours is incredibly fast by our expectations. Yes, absolutely. That's more than acceptable. Thank you, Director. Do not thank me yet, Ambassador. We have not made our decision. But the director's tone suggested they were not entirely displeased with how the session had gone. Before we adjourn, Sarthax said, I have one final question for the human delegation. You've told us what you want, what you offer, what you need, but you haven't told us what you fear. What is humanity's greatest concern about joining the council? It was Chen who answered, her voice quiet but clear. We're afraid we'll lose what makes us human. We're afraid that in trying to fit into your galaxy, We'll smooth off all our rough edges until we're just another generic spacefaring species. We're afraid that our chaos and creativity and controlled recklessness, all the things that make us who we are, will be seen as flaws to be corrected rather than features to be valued. She looked around the chamber, making eye contact with various delegates. We want to be part of this amazing galactic community, but we want to be partners, not pets. Equals, not students forever learning, but never contributing. We want to be accepted as we are, messy, chaotic, innovative, and occasionally doing things that make more cautious species very nervous, Rodriguez added softly. We're afraid you'll try to make us sit still and be quiet, and we're afraid that if you do, we might lose the very qualities that could make us valuable members of this council. The chamber was silent, the weight of that admission hanging in the air. Finally, the director spoke. That is a legitimate fear, Dr. Chen, Ambassador Rodriguez, and I can offer you this assurance. The council has maintained itself for 17,000 years. By recognizing that diversity is strength, we have warrior species and pacifist species, scientific species and spiritual species, species that reproduce through binary fission, and species with 17 different sexes. We have learned that attempting to homogenize our members serves no one. Your chaos, your creativity, your controlled recklessness, as you put it, these will not be suppressed. They may occasionally be redirected or channeled, but not eliminated. The director paused, their bioluminescence pulsing in patterns that seemed almost affectionate. Besides, I suspect that attempting to make humanity sit still and be quiet would be as futile as attempting to stop a star from burning. Some forces of nature are simply best accepted and appreciated rather than controlled. Rodriguez grinned. Director, I think that might be the nicest thing anyone's ever said about humanity. Don't let it go to your head, Ambassador, the director replied with what might have been humor. Now, the session is adjourned. Council members will reconvene in private chambers. The human delegation is welcome to remain on the station as our guests. I'm told your poker game with our security staff has generated considerable interest. Perhaps you might teach some of our diplomatic staff how to play. It would be our pleasure, Rodriguez said, and he meant it. As the chamber began to empty, delegates filing out in groups discussing everything they'd heard. Thel'zara approached the human delegation. Rodriguez saw her coming and smiled warmly. Ambassador Thel'zara, thank you for your presentation earlier. We were watching the broadcast. You represented our case fairly, even while expressing legitimate concerns. I tried to be objective, Thel'zara said. Though I confess, watching you negotiate just now, I'm not certain objective assessment of humanity is possible. You're too unpredictable. We get that a lot, Chen said cheerfully. But hey, unpredictable keeps things interesting, right? Thel'zara's colors shifted to patterns that might have been amusement. Dr. Chen, I have to ask. The name of your ship is absolutely appropriate given how we use it. Chen finished. Yeah, it's become a sort of tradition. Human ships tend to have names that either sound intimidating or are absolutely ridiculous. Sometimes both. My favorite so far is the HDMS. I'm not saying it was aliens, but it was probably aliens. It's a research vessel. Why do humans do that? Thel'zara asked, genuinely curious. Why give important vessels frivolous names? Rodriguez answered, because taking ourselves too seriously is dangerous. Humor keeps us humble. It reminds us that despite all our achievements, we're still just clever apes who figured out how to make fire. And things sort of escalated from there. Clever apes, Thel'zara repeated slowly. You're aware that most species prefer more dignified self-descriptions? Most species didn't evolve from primates who used to throw feces at each other when angry. Chen said matter-of-factly. We're very aware of our undignified origins. We figure owning it is better than pretending we're something we're not. Thel'zara felt her colors shifting through patterns of bemused appreciation. You're absolutely right that the galaxy isn't ready for humanity. I'm not certain the galaxy will ever be ready for humanity, but I think we need you anyway. That might be the second nicest thing anyone said about humanity today, Rodriguez said. Thank you, Ambassador. That means a lot coming from you. The next 12 hours passed in a blur. The human delegation did indeed teach several dozen council staff members how to play poker, with predictably chaotic results. They shared their cookies, which were universally praised by species with compatible biochemistries. They told stories about Earth, answered questions about human culture, and generally charmed everyone they encountered. But underneath the friendly interactions, tension built. 12 hours to decide humanity's fate in the galactic community. 12 hours that would determine whether humans would be partners or outsiders. In the private chambers, the council deliberated. 473 delegations, each with their own concerns, priorities, and prejudices. The debate was fierce. Some delegates wanted immediate full membership. Others wanted modified timelines. A few still insisted on the traditional 200-cycle integration. But slowly, a consensus emerged. Not unanimous, the council rarely achieved unanimity, but strong enough to constitute a decision. When the 12 hours were up, the Grand Chamber reconvened. The human delegation entered quietly, trying to hide their nervousness behind professional composure. Rodriguez's hands were steady, but Chen was fidgeting with what appeared to be a small fidget spinner, a human device for managing anxiety. The director took their position at the center of the chamber, bioluminescence pulsing in formal patterns. Ambassador Rodriguez, Dr. Chen, members of the human delegation. The council has deliberated carefully on your petition for immediate membership. We have considered your arguments, reviewed your proposals, and assessed the implications of our decision. We have reached a conclusion. The chamber fell silent. Rodriguez and his team stood perfectly still, barely breathing. The Galactic Council has decided to grant humanity full membership status, effective immediately, with the following conditions. Rodriguez's eyes widened. Chen dropped her fidget spinner. Several human delegation members grabbed each other's hands. The director continued. First, human colonies and vessels will be subject to all standard council regulations regarding trade, warfare, resource exploitation, and interspecies interaction. Second, humanity will participate in mandatory cultural exchange programs for the next 10 cycles, hosting council observers on human worlds and sending human ambassadors to council worlds. Third, human technological developments will be shared with the council, subject to agreed-upon licensing frameworks. Fourth, humanity will accept council advisors and oversight committees to assist with integration and ensure compliance with regulations. We accept all those conditions, Rodriguez said quickly, his voice tight with emotion. I wasn't finished, the director said, but their tone was gentle. Fifth, and finally, humanity will be granted one additional seat on the Council's Exploration and Innovation Committee, recognizing your species' unique capabilities in those areas. You will also be assigned as primary responders for crisis situations requiring rapid, unconventional solutions. Rodriguez looked stunned. You're actually giving us responsibilities? Already? You offered solutions to 17 ongoing crises, Sarthak said from her seat. We would be foolish not to put your problem-solving capabilities to use. Besides, I suspect that giving humans specific jobs to do will channel your disruptive energy in constructive directions. Vex'thor stood, his massive form somehow less intimidating than it had been at the start. Welcome to the Galactic Council, Ambassador Rodriguez. Try not to break too many things. No promises, Rodriguez said with a grin that was half joy, half tears. But we'll do our best. The chamber erupted in a mix of reactions: applause from some species, approval gestures from others, resigned acceptance from a few. Chen was openly crying, wiping tears from her eyes while laughing. Other human delegation members were hugging each other, their professional composure completely abandoned. Thel'zara watched from the sidelines, her colors shifting through patterns of satisfaction and anticipation. She had warned the council that humanity would change everything. They hadn't listened at first, but they'd listened eventually. And now, for better or worse, humanity was part of the galactic community. The director allowed the celebration to continue for a few moments before pulsing for attention again. Ambassador Rodriguez, you and your delegation will need to sign formal membership documents, undergo orientation protocols, and begin the process of establishing permanent human representation at council facilities. This will take several days. However, I believe there is one matter that requires immediate attention. Rodriguez composed himself, wiping his own eyes. Yes, Director. The Xithian survivors you rescued from the quarantine zone. They have formally petitioned for resettlement assistance. As humanity's first significant action as a council member, I propose you take the lead on coordinating their integration, working with our Refugee Services Committee. Consider it your first official assignment. We'd be honored, Rodriguez said. The Xithians saved themselves by surviving in stasis for 1,500 years. The least we can do is help them find a place in the modern galaxy. Excellent. The director's bioluminescence softened. One more thing, Ambassador. Off the record, as much as anything can be off the record in this chamber. Why? Why did you push so hard for immediate membership when you must have known it would be controversial, difficult, and might fail completely? Rodriguez considered the question seriously. Because humanity has learned that opportunities don't wait for you to be ready. If you wait until you're certain, until you've prepared for every contingency, until you're absolutely sure you won't fail, you'll wait forever. Sometimes you just have to take the leap and figure out how to fly on the way down. Besides, he added with a slight smile, as one of our philosophers once said, a ship is safe in harbor, but that's not what ships are for, a philosopher. The director asked, more or less. Actually, I think it was a greeting card, but the point stands. The director's bioluminescence pulsed in patterns that looked remarkably like laughter. Humanity is going to be very interesting to have around. Council is adjourned. Welcome to the family, humans. Try to keep up. 3 cycles later, Ambassador Thel'zara stood on the observation deck of the Council's main station, looking out at the stars. So much had changed in such a short time. Human vessels were now a common sight at Council ports. Human students were enrolling in Council universities. Human scientists were collaborating with researchers from dozens of species. The silicon decay plague had been contained using the human-proposed solution, with better results than anyone had projected. The Kelmerthoth trade dispute had been resolved through human intermediary services. And just yesterday, a human exploration vessel had made first contact with a pre-FTL species in the Outer Rim, following every protocol perfectly while somehow also managing to accidentally introduce them to the concept of jazz music. Beautiful view, a voice said beside her. Rodriguez had arrived quietly, holding to containers of what he'd explained was coffee, a human stimulant beverage. He offered her one. My biochemistry can't process this, Thel'zara said. Right, sorry. I keep forgetting. He set the container aside. How are you doing, Ambassador? I know this has been an intense few cycles. I'm exhausted, Thel'zara admitted, and exhilarated, and terrified. Mostly, I'm trying to adjust to the fact that everything I predicted has come true, both the good and the bad. What's the bad? Rodriguez asked with genuine concern. 17 member species have filed complaints about human vessels violating navigational protocols. Human colonists on 3 worlds have already established what you call black markets for trading items that are technically restricted. And I've received 42 reports of humans teaching other species what you call memes, resulting in communication chaos across multiple sectors. Rodriguez winced. Yeah, sorry about that. We're working on it. And the good? Thel'zara's colors shifted to warmer patterns. Human medical researchers have made breakthrough discoveries. In collaboration with Forian xenobiologists, human engineers and Quillarian architects have designed a new class of space station that's more efficient than anything we've built before. And last week, a human musician performed a concert that brought together species that haven't spoken to each other into hundreds cycles because they were all moved by something you call rock and roll. That's humanity in a nutshell, Rodriguez said. We break your rules and exceed your expectations in roughly equal measure. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching ships come and go from the station. Finally, Thel'zara spoke again. Ambassador Rodriguez, I have to ask, now that you're here, now that you have what you wanted, what's next for humanity? Rodriguez's smile was visible in his reflection in the viewport. Everything. We're going to explore every star we can reach, learn from every species willing to teach us, solve every problem that needs solving, make mistakes, apologize for them, and learn from them. We're going to be the best council members we can be while still being unapologetically human. He turned to look at her directly. "And we're going to prove that you were right to warn the Council about us, and right to recommend they accept us anyway. We're going to make you proud that you were humanity's first real friend in the galaxy." Thel'zara's colors shifted through patterns of emotion she didn't have names for. "I am already proud, Ambassador, and terrified, and excited. You humans have a remarkable ability to inspire all those emotions simultaneously. We really do." Rodriguez agreed. "It's kind of our thing." A chimming sound interrupted them. Rodriguez's communication device. He checked it and grinned. "The Exploration Committee wants to brief us on a mission they're planning. Apparently, there's an anomaly in the Beta Quadrant that's been puzzling scientists for decades, and they think a human perspective might be useful." "An anomaly," Thel'zara repeated. "Why do I suspect this will involve humans doing something inadvisable that somehow works?" "Because you're learning to predict us," Rodriguez said cheerfully. "Come on, this should be interesting." As they left the observation deck together, Thel'zara reflected on everything that had happened since that day she'd stood before the Council to deliver her warning. She'd been right about everything. Humanity was disruptive, unpredictable, and transformative. They were changing the galaxy in ways both profound and mundane. But she'd also been right about something else. The galaxy needed them. Needed their innovation, their resilience, their refusal to accept that anything was impossible. The Council had maintained order for 17,000 years, but order without growth was stagnation. Humanity brought growth. Chaotic, messy, wonderful growth. She just hoped the galaxy could survive it. Far across the station, in a small observation room, the director floated alone, watching the same stars that Thel'zara and Rodriguez had been observing. Their bioluminescence pulsed in complex patterns that no one was there to interpret. The director had lived for over 3,000 years, had presided over the Council for most of that time. They had seen species rise and fall, civilizations bloom and fade, technologies advance and regress. They had witnessed wonders and horrors beyond counting. But in all those centuries, they had never encountered a species quite like humans. So young, so chaotic, so impossibly vital. The director had voted to accept humanity's petition, not because they believed humans were ready for the Council, but because they believed the Council needed to be ready for humans. The galaxy was changing. Old orders were giving way to new possibilities. And humanity, with their controlled recklessness and boundless optimism, might be exactly what was needed to navigate those changes. Or they might be the spark that set everything ablaze. Time would tell. The director was patient. They could wait and watch and see what humanity would become. And if they were very, very fortunate, they might survive to see humanity reach its full potential. The director's bioluminescence pulsed in patterns that, if translated, might have read as something close to hope. The emergency session of the Council was called when a human exploration vessel made an unprecedented discovery. A dormant wormhole network that connected distant regions of the galaxy, built by an ancient civilization and forgotten for millennia. The human crew, aboard a ship cheerfully named Oops, we found something amazing, had activated one of the gates while attempting to study it. Within hours, signals began emerging from the other side, signals from isolated civilizations that had been cut off from the rest of the galaxy for thousands of years. As the Council scrambled to understand the implications, Ambassador Rodriguez stood at the central podium once again, looking remarkably calm for someone whose species had just accidentally reconnected half the galaxy. "In our defense," he began, and the entire Council groaned in unison. "The manual we found was very unclear about which buttons not to press." The director's bioluminescence flickered in patterns that unmistakably conveyed exasperation, mixed with resignation. "Ambassador Rodriguez, your species has been a Council member for exactly one cycle. One. And you've already reshaped galactic infrastructure. Is that bad?" Rodriguez asked innocently. "It's certainly not boring," Sarthax observed, her ancient voice carrying notes of what might have been amusement. "I haven't been this entertained in 600 years. Vex'thor rose from his seat, looked at Rodriguez, and said with perfect seriousness, "Humanity, I am rescinding my earlier statement. Please do try to break fewer things. Still no promises," Rodriguez said with an apologetic grin. "But look on the bright side. we just expanded the Council's reach by approximately 30%, and we found 12 new species eager to join. That's got to count for something, right? You found them by accident, someone pointed out. Is there any other way to find things? Dr. Chen called from the human delegation seats. The Council dissolved into chaos once again. Multiple species arguing in multiple languages about protocols, procedures, and the apparent impossibility of managing humanity. But underneath the chaos was something new: energy, excitement, possibility. The galaxy had indeed been warned that humans had arrived, and it was indeed too late to stop them. But as the Council slowly came to realize, perhaps that wasn't such a bad thing after all. Somewhere in the back of the chamber, a young delegate from a species that had just joined 300 cycles ago leaned over to their neighbor and whispered, "Is it always like this?" "No," the neighbor replied. "Watching humans and aliens argue and laugh and gesture wildly at holographic displays of the newly discovered Wormhole network. This is new. This is humanity. I think I like it," the young delegate said. "You're not alone," came the reply. "Half the Council is terrified, and the other half is taking notes. Either way, things are never going to be boring again." And across the galaxy, on hundreds of worlds in dozens of species, beings looked up at the stars and wondered what humanity would discover next, what rules they would break, what impossible problems they would solve. The Galactic Council had been warned. Humans had arrived, and the universe would never be the same. We set sail on this new sea because there's new knowledge to be gained and new rights to be won, and they must be won and used for the progress of all people. President John F. Kennedy. Adapted for galactic exploration.